Hello, welcome to my talk, Adapting Hosting Platforms for Starshot's Automatic Updates. This is a talk focused at people who are interested in, the decision-making process and how things are implemented at a hosting platform layer, given some of the differences that are required as part of Starshot. So this is not about Starshot itself, but the process of implementation at a platform layer, and every platform is different, so results will eventuate differently. I'm Carl. I'm a platform engineer at Amazee, and I started in Drupal at about 2011, 2012. I started in a personal project, cPanel, and undertook a professional role shortly after, and that's how I came about. As my pathway to operations, I worked with local CI systems, so managing remote sites fully automatically, locally and distributed amongst a team. I moved into the Kubernetes space shortly after the Lagoon adoption by GovCMS, so I joined that team, and Previous Next and Amazee after that, continuing my investment into microservices, which is what this talk will be focused on. So I wanted to kind of share a story. Some of the technologies that I've used in the past, some of the technologies I continue to use, and how those technologies are going to continue helping me do my job in the future. So starting off in about 2012, FTP was quite a popular thing. I was in the Australian federal government at the time, and it was a little archaic. I kind of cringe at the thought now, but we had full control over the file system in Drupal. We had processes to update our Drupal core, our modules, and this largely involved deleting a Drupal site in some cases. We didn't really have a process for doing a blue-green deployment. Not all sites had this model, so it was very wide and varied and problematic for various reasons. Deployments had to be done after hours, communications was a nightmare, and it's just not something that should be done. I moved to a different agency shortly after, from 2014. I started using Agear, which is for those that don't know, it's a Drupal 7 based hosting platform. I understand it was supposed to get upgraded and modernized, but I haven't really seen that. The instance I was using at the time was actually managed by one of my colleagues, ironically, but this gave us, it sandboxed our access from needing to get to Drupal. We could do a blue-green deployment, we could upgrade modules, we could do all of this stuff without the risk of touching the file system, without the risk of downtime, and it was a great system for its time. And the Jenkins CI system was more a evolution towards operations role, where I found a bunch of things I wanted to do on a site. Conveniently enough, this was all Acquia based, and it did make it very easy, but it was still a overstep of the permissions that should be required to do all of this stuff. So this system was actually used for local development to build an infinite array of local sites, as well as managing remote sites. Speaking about the present, CI and GitOps is a huge thing today. The reason this has become so big in the Drupal space is because Composer has become so prevalent, so easy to use, and largely we are dependent on it. This was a possibility in the world of Drupal 7. I, in fact, had a very sophisticated system based on Composer and Drupal 7, but that was very high maintenance, to say the least. We can use it today, and it's a lot easier. What this does facilitate for us is we have the ability to use Git branching. We could have different branches for different environments. At a hosting layer, you could assign a different environment to a branch. You could define logic that helps provide you that. One note, it does completely sandbox you. You don't need any access to the site, which is a huge win for security. Speaking of security, Kubernetes is one of the larger contributing factors to security in microservice architectures. we can craft business logic, we can craft policies and access controls around any requirement that we have. It's just a matter of architecting the solution in a way that fits the rest of the system. What automatic updates, present. Yeah, so we can define our logic and we can run effectively what we need to do with that. Speaking of the future, how is automatic updates going to be influenced in the future? Well, there's a couple of strategies. Git may not have to be a thing. Like a customer may or may not have access to a Git repository. So speaking of Git, we'll have to place in a certain location, like customer facing or not. And we have to sort of be able to create ephemeral environments out of that for customers. To have branch strategies, to have something to facilitate your backups, your restorations, your MySQL images, and even down to the local environment this is at play. So how does a user go from a Drupal CMS to an enterprise product or back? Well, there's two ways of doing this. There's a manual process or there's an automated process. For Amaze's Lagoon, we are very composable, and ideally a project should mold into how a user declares their project. However, a lot of this logic will become very problematic, very expensive, and it's not ideal. So as a alternative, platforms will probably, I can't see the future, but they'll probably be seeking to migrate from one project to another, which simplifies a lot of that down. So users will have a way to go from A to B and B to A. Volumes are going to be managed a bit differently. One of the things Kubernetes does for us is makes it scalable and sort of manages the CPU utilization of your workloads. So having a read-write volume is going to have an impact on the resource usage. It's going to have an impact on how the requirements for the system. You will need more volumes. So fundamentally, it's a different project architecture, and if you are provisioning your project resource for resource, then this is going to be something that needs to be crafted, but you probably won't notice this when it's ready. Local development is going to be different. Toby has been working on an example. It's still in progress at this time, but having a local environment that reflects everything that's running in the cluster, which you may not have access to, it's sort of not quite the same. The local development experience still needs work, and scaffolding is still something that needs effort in the Drupal space. The ability for a package to be able to create or provision a file and being able to work from that. So there's a Drupal issue there, and this will come in time. Cybersecurity is a big concern for most. What I found in looking at this is the most important thing for cybersecurity teams is the ability to influence and access control where required. We already have the shell of that, but we need to be forward-looking. The best advice would be work with your platforms, work with your providers and your auditors, and essentially that. For platform owners, metrics and logging will become a huge advantage here. We could make use of those in the context of something like an access policy, so we can really provide evidence to auditors to make sure compliance is upheld. And this is for platforms that already have it at first. So access policies are a system that you can craft a very custom way to provide a access control in Drupal. Something I was only alerted to recently, and it would fit something like this, a very obscure security requirement, and logging and metrics would provide evidence from that. So it's it'll come together. Who's going to use it? This Drupal CMS is not specifically for enterprise. We won't really see a lot of enterprise users here, but why does that matter? It matters, yeah. Drupal 7 is still quite in use, and we don't really have the commonality of automatic updates yet. We'll be waiting for Drupal 10.1 and 11 to become a lot more common before we see this in the wild. So we still have a little bit of time. The most important takeaway from this talk should be that your platforms, your providers, they need to know you're interested. They need to know the work is going to be worth it. If there's nothing behind that, we don't know. I'll leave you on a positive note, because this is a very good thing for the community as a whole. I started my journey in Drupal in a self-hosted environment on cPanel. There was nothing else for me at the time. But this, once again, allows this to happen. Individuals can come in and really utilize Drupal once again. We have a booth. Come and see us. We do a lot of enterprise hosting, and we can help with effectively anything to do with Docker. So please come and see us, or just say hello. Thank you.